for anyone listening, I've got Roberta Ravella on the call with me today. Roberta is a long-time client. I usually say this is long-suffering clients, but someone I'd consider a friend as well. I interviewed you, Roberta, for my podcast a few years ago, so I'll cross-reference that. You've now just launched a new venture, which I'm hoping that you'll talk about, to do with finding joy in business, which I think is desperately needed. And I sent Roberta a message on LinkedIn saying, well, why don't we have a discussion about finding joy in your story? That's something that we need to do. We need to be telling our stories. We need to be communicating who we are.
Absolutely.
So, we don't have a great structure for this chat, but we thought we'd jump on and chew the fat. So,
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. I wondered if you could start by talking about your new venture, actually, as a starting point.
Yes. So 2025, I want to say, was the first full year of the Joy Experiment. In 2024, before I was running a marketing business, helping people develop their content, basically all around their story, mostly for real estate agents and finance people in the U.S., which is a very differentiated industry. I used to call it realtor on the shelf. You just go pick which outfit you want because, you can't swing a cat without hitting a realtor, right? So we would use story, obviously, to differentiate them, to communicate their values, and help them get the kind of business that they wanted. So I was doing that. And I also did an AI venture with a friend. We were doing content generated by an enormous prompt. That was a story prompt. This is ChatGPT, probably 3.0 or whatever, and was generating some decent content for us. So that's what I was doing. And somewhere in the middle of the year, I was like, this just isn't it's like wearing old clothes. And so I took a little bit of time. My husband's family's in Italy, so we go there for a little bit every year. Took some time off. When we were there, when I came back, I was like, you know what? I want to really do this from the position of not hiding behind marketing, which I still love marketing, but really saying what I want to say, which is, if you're not enjoying this, then what's the point? I know we have to pay our bills. You got the mortgage. You have two little ones. They really like to eat. And so I get it. I've fed myself for most of my life, but at some point, and the sooner the better, when we can find our joy, it produces a whole different kind of business, a whole different kind of life. And I feel like we find that, I know we find it from aligning with our values and being who we truly are. And interestingly enough, for me, that came from being honest with myself about my story, how I got here, what I've done, what worked well for me, what didn't, what really brought me energy, because some of those things, even though I didn't necessarily want to do them anymore in the way I was doing them, writing that content and being involved in telling stories and wrapping up metaphors and helping people understand things in that way is a lot of fun for me, and I love it. Yeah. So it's not necessarily find your passion. That's a big thing that, quite frankly, annoys me. Maybe just because, Rob, you can identify with this. We're not grandly passionate people. Some people are. I think you can find joy in almost anything that you're doing. It's more bringing your values to it and bringing who you are to it. Yeah. And I think that's where you sit quite a bit in your philosophy of marketing.
Yeah, I can sort of add to that. So one of my mentors is a lady called Rachel Elnor Love. Rachel was one of the early dragons on the BBC show Dragon's Den, which is cool. Shark Tank, basically.
Yeah.
And she put out a course last year called The Dragon's Guide to Business. And the very first lesson in that was a 30-minute exercise. And the question at the end of that was, if ignoring all financial decisions, if you organize your business around what you truly love, what would that thing be? And then answering that question and then feeling that expansion towards that is the basis of everything. And then as soon as you've lost that, it's like, okay, you need to retrace the steps and go back, because we all lose the thread, because we've got all of these pressures. You need to pay the bills. You need to do this. Opportunities come along that are kind of easy profit first things, easy kind of pocket first things, where it's like, can you just do this? Can you just do a website? Can you just do a new ads campaign or whatever it is for me? And then you go off and do these things, and you think, I've lost the spark.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that was
it
a
was
bit of
really
a
so interesting to hear
catalyst.
it, to hear her say that. Okay, that's what you
Yeah,
need to do.
absolutely. I mean, that was a bit of a catalyst for me. I was doing a specific person's marketing and it was working. Like she was getting calendar appointments off her Facebook ads. So we were, stories. It was all stories. And that was really fun for me to do the story parts. But the other parts that I was doing to put it all together and whatever, I just remember getting up one day and going, wow, why am I doing this? I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
how do I get back to that spot again? Because through all my transition through the mortgage industry, getting out of that, doing a little business coaching and knowing that wasn't for me, like, I think when you're sitting there and you're saying to yourself, why am I doing this? And if money in the pocket, okay, we've all been there where that was the priority. Heck, if it's even not close to the first priority, I'll even correct myself on that. I think fulfilling your joy and that thing, that work that you do and you do best will always bring you more money.
Yeah, I think it's a feeling as well, isn't it? When you it's not something you can think your way out of. It's a feeling that feels right at the time.
Definitely.
Yeah, you've been telling stories for a long time. It's funny actually. I think back to all of the people that I work with over time, and I still remember you kind of telling baseball stories and things like that. And I'm like, oh no, not another baseball story. But like the fact that I remember that is like, I don't think we remember what people have said about their work or about their content or whatever, but we shelve in our minds things that they've told us as regards to story. And I know you through Perry Marshall's world, and like
Mhm.
I can reel off several of Perry's stories that he's just told kind of over the years. I mostly work with people who have already pre-sold on the idea of telling stories, but I think actually people understand that yes, they need to tell their story, but then they go and do it, and they go, no one's going to be interested in it. I haven't done anything that interesting. And there's all these like programs that run in your head that are conditioned to you from school, where you just kind of conditioned to kind of go and get a job, go and fit in, go and do something that you don't like to earn some money, and all of that kind of kicks in. And that's kind of that's kind of the starting point that I wanted to
Okay.
start at today, in terms of like, okay, well, I think you can find joy in your story, and I think you can communicate joy in your story. But the starting point for a lot of my clients is, yes, they understand that story matters. They come to me because they want help telling it. But what I've seen recently is like, I go through the storytelling work, and it comes to them to like start talking about it, start publishing it, and they go, I'm just going to go back to my content.
Yeah, there's the vulnerability piece of it, which is probably a little overused. Authenticity and vulnerability are like officially buzzwords now, but there's something about, oh, and I'll throw this name out here. I just did a workshop with Megan Macedo,
Yeah,
and she was talking about how there's intimacy in it. And I feel like at first it felt vulnerable for me. Like, ugh, if I say these things, right? Especially when I started talking about the joy experiment, because one of the things that really pushed me to get where I am is I was in my condo building. We live in Florida, across the street from the beach, and we have a little gym downstairs. So I was on the treadmill down there and reading a book, and in the book it says, if you do everything here, read the book, do the things, you'll have the relationship you want, the house, you'll live in the house you want to live in, and you'll have the bank account you want. And I was like, I looked at the author and I said, well, I really love my husband. I love where I live. I live across the street from the beach, dude. We're okay with the bank, and I'm not happy. Like, WTF.
yeah,
And the first time I said that out loud, I was like, oh my God, who's going to say what a privileged little white, you know, uh, who does she think she is to say that she's not happy? Like, is she ungrateful? That's a really rude individual. All the things that come, like you say, into your head. Like, how can I say this to
that's all the
people
conditioning
that,
coming in, though, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah,
like there's all this suffering in the world. I mean, turn on the news and actually don't turn on the news, turn it right back off. But I mean, who are you to say you had some suffering or whatever? And then there was the opposite effect of it as well, where when I would go to tell it, I'm like, you see so many people who tell their tales of suffering as a leverage point, and they tell it so you believe them. Okay, there's credibility in our suffering and in our stories, whatever. That's one of the reasons we tell them. But also, I see it used as if you haven't suffered enough, then I can't really believe you. And so it's used like, okay, I don't have a PhD and I don't have $1 billion CEO job. So I'm going to tell you how much I suffered and
Yeah.
then you can believe me. And both of those things felt really just intense to me in a way that I dealt with both of them. And I think when we go through the process of what you're saying, like these things are what's keeping me from telling my story, you will unravel the thing that's keeping you from your joy. And for me, it was what will people think about me if I do what I really want to do and say what I really want to say? And also, do I have a right to this? Am I worthy of this? Am I enough for this? It, do I have a right to say or to be in this spot? And those two things really kept me from doing what I really wanted to do, much less telling my story. And when I dealt with them, and it's kind of ongoing, I feel like it's a layer of onions. Um, the more I'm able to tell my story and the more I'm able to tell it in my own energy.
Yeah. I've come to believe it's kind of a practice as well. It becomes like a muscle where you start sharing. The hardest thing is sharing a little bit to begin with. So my recent developments in this is that I was telling you just before we started to hit record that I've started to provide memoir services in terms of helping preserve the stories of family relatives who've lived a life and have got stories to tell, and you want to pass those, you want to pass your grandparents' stories on to your grandkids, type thing. The catalyst for that really was my granddad. So my granddad passed in 2021, but I spent a lot of time with him and with my grandparents growing up. Just in summer holidays, like my
Mhm.
parents used to work full time, so we used to go and spend time with the grandparents, and we'd go on kind of long walks. We'd go and walk the dogs, and it'd tell you all of these stories. It'd tell you like which mountains he climbed, and he'd be able to name all of the birds. He'd tell you about meeting Jimmy Connors on Hadrian's Wall. He'd tell you about growing up in Liverpool in the 1940s during the war,
Mm.
and how they used to go to Everton Football Club and climb over the fence to get in for free. And how one weekend they jumped over the fence, and because it was during the war, all the attendances were down, and they jumped into this empty stand that just had one police officer in. So they climbed over the fence quick, but he actually impaled his hand on a railing on the way back
Oh
home, and he
no.
still had this mark on his hand. So when he passed in 2021, I thought, well, the least I can do is write up some of these stories, and I gave a talk at his funeral, and I shared some of these things that we've been through, and it was a joyful thing. It was a hard thing, but it was a joyful thing. I would say it's probably the hardest and best thing I've ever done. But then in retrospect, I was like, well, wouldn't it be great if I kind of recorded some of these some of these stories from him?
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
think about everything that anyone's ever said to you, and it's like, well, I only remember a slice. So you got this kind of Chinese whispers game going on of like, okay, he said this, pass it on. I'm like, what did he say
Right.
again?
Right.
But it's one of those things where, as I was preparing the sales material for my memoir service, which is called Wise Echoes, I was revisiting my granddad's stories, and I'd say I have this sort of fairly stoic outlook on life, but it's
Hmm.
one of the things that does make me cry to kind of go back through it. Um, and I say all this just to say, like creating marketing and creating content, like it feels quite dry. Like I'm going to sit down and write this, but it should feel joyful as well. It should feel something. Um, so yeah, um,
Well, it's the experience of life, right? And I think one of the mistakes that I made and we're also encouraged to make is to separate our business from our life. And you can't. You can try, but you can't. And when I started this joy experiment, I was gonna say, okay, about this is about your business. I'm like, no, it's about your life. And that doesn't mean that it's well, there's another story in my head. It was like, oh, I'm gonna be another life coach out there in South Florida. Boy.
Yeah,
We have as many of those as we have realtors, right? But it's not about that. It's more about my business fits in my life. Life is about how you experience it. And all those stories are the experiences of your life. And that's how we also help people understand and communicate what it is we're trying to say to them, whether we're trying to help them see if they want to purchase memoir services. Is this important to them? Is this the right person for them? Or you're just, telling your grandson something so he understands you. Story is the way that we do it, and it's the way we've always done it. I think with social media and all of the shorts and all of that, even if you look at it, the things that go viral tell a story. The people who become influencers, they're still telling a story. And it's usually their story, even if it's slightly made up and polished and they've got a filter on or whatever.
yeah.
It's
There's,
still
there's
usually
there's a
their
lot of surface
story.
level stuff of like, oh, poor me, I was down to my last tin of baked beans. But then I discovered this simple 5-step process, and for just the exchange of your email address, I will share it with
Yes.
you. I'm like,
But that's not their story usually.
no,
You have a BS
it's
meter
not
that
the
goes
real
off when
story. Yeah,
people are not telling their real story. Yeah, we know.
yeah,
And sometimes you don't care. I mean, I follow some people on TikTok that I really don't care. There's it just makes me laugh. But I'm not giving them my email address.
yeah.
Yeah. I think you really it also depends on how in tune you are with yourself at times. But even when I've been very disconnected from myself, I still had a good BS meter on that one.
What I find personally for telling my own story and telling it in my marketing is that much harder to do for yourself, and you second guess it yourself. So where I've tried to tell my own story, I've I've gone to say a coffee shop. I've I've blocked out the morning and gone right. I'm gonna just list out all the stories I want to sort of outline, and you get stuck. And then this like little voice pops up in your brain and goes, "Psst, you're not being very productive." Or like,
Yeah.
"Psst, you haven't invoiced anyone today." So then you start to second guess yourself, and it's quite hard to do. And I think this is the same for my clients. So like, what this really the service that I do for my clients is like they show up, they have a fairly long form conversation with me, which can take up to about 4 hours to kind of really
Mhm.
go through someone. I mean, it depends. It depends how much they want to talk.
Yeah.
But I think everyone finds it easier to just do it in dialogue or guided dialogue. And they come off the call and think they haven't told me anything. I'm like, it's okay, I've got it. um, I think it's much easier to do in dialogue. And going back to my granddad, I mean, it wasn't like he set out to tell me a story. We were just on long walks, just having natural dialogue, natural
Yeah.
conversation, and it's those things that kind of lodged in my brain. So that's the kind of environment that I try to replicate for my clients in terms of it's like you're going on a long walk with me,
Yeah.
and we're just going to have a chat, and,
Right.
and
Well,
and you get home and
that's
you
the
think you
best
haven't told me
place.
anything, but there's always gold in there.
Yeah. I think it's the best place, especially moving. There's some research about walking, especially at a certain pace, that just starts your brain, especially if you can get lost in it. You don't have the phone, you're with somebody, you're just talking. Um, there's a whole thing in your physiology, but also I used to always carry sticky notes with me sticky notes and a pen when I was doing walking or running, because you're halfway through it and then something just pops out, that story that you forgot, or you're trying to tinker with it and you can't get it right. And it just comes out.
Yeah,
And I never did it for productivity per se. I was usually doing it for just activity for workout or whatever. But even now, last weekend, I was doing some things with the podcast. I have a podcast, the Joy Experiment podcast, and I was trying to think through some things. There was something like, I like it, it's doing well, but there's something off, and I can't figure out what it is. Like the experience isn't quite where I want it. And so I've been really listening to my intuition intentionally. And what I got was the word relax,
Mm.
because I was going to do a whole bunch of stuff. I have reports. I had some videos from an expert on YouTube that I was going to watch, and I got relax. So I have a little paint by numbers kit that I like to paint with, because I like to paint, but I'm not
My
very good
wife
at
does
it. So,
that. Yeah.
right. It's fun. So I'm like doodle painting, and I'm having a good time doing it. It's in the morning, drinking my coffee. And it's like, oh, it's my environment. It's the way I have my setup. And this setup is new that I have right now. I was standing up behind a stand up desk because I like to stand up generally. And if you look at me, I look all business.
Yeah.
I'm behind a desk. I'm wearing nice, whatever. And so the people who are talking to me are talking to me in a very professional, serious business way. Even if we're having fun and chatting, it still had that flavor. And I wanted it to be more conversational and more relaxed. And I wasn't able to direct the conversations that way. And it was the environment, basically. Like I'm sitting you in across the desk from me, and
Mm.
that's how you're responding to me. And so I did this. I changed the whole setup to where I'm sitting, which I'm getting used to sitting in because I like to pace a little when I talk. But this has worked out really well. And it's actually helped me relax a little more. And so there's something about letting go of the productivity part completely and relaxing into it. And even if you're just thinking through, like if you're, you go to the pub, you sit down, you get your pint or whatever, doodle a little, read a little, give your mind that space to wander around in the back. That's what the walk does. And it will bring to you, oh, I remember this story. I remember when this happened. I remember how scared I was when I got my first job and I had to interview or whatever. And your stories just start to come to you naturally and the ones that should come to you.
How do you record them or make notes on them? Do you still use the sticky notes?
I do. I have sticky notes. I have pen and paper. I'm a real pen and paper kind of
Mm.
person. I know some other people who will type in their phone or they'll write on their phone or even voice to text. I am just such a pen and paper person. Or if it's coming out quick, I'll jump on my laptop and just type it
Yeah.
up. Yeah. I'm genetically predisposed to type very well.
Mm.
My Nana could type 90 words a minute with no errors
Yeah.
on a big old Electrolux typewriter. So I can type pretty quick without looking. So that's just for me. I can think and type.
Yeah.
So whichever way it comes out the best. And I think the modality also depends on where it's going.
Mm.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about my average client base. There's probably two types of people. There's the type of person who's more DIY in terms of manages their own content. They like to write. They've got to research their own story ideas. They're not going to work with someone like me. They're just going to do it by themselves. Is that
Mhm.
all of that? What you've just described is the right approach of like as ideas come up, like find a way. It doesn't. I'm actually not too
Yeah.
bothered about how you do it, but you have to capture the ideas as they come up. The second type of client is someone that isn't going to be able to do that, and they need to really have the dialogue with someone that's recorded.
Yeah.
I'd say more people fall into that dialogue category.
I think so too.
Mm.
Because if it's not your thing, you and I both love content. We love stories. One of the things that the first little course I took from you, you talked about watching documentaries. And at the time, I wasn't sleeping very well. So I would just watch documentaries in the middle of the night. And I still talk about some of those documentaries. And I still, when I listen to a podcast, there's certain things that I just will catch and write them down and talk about it. I just watched a interview with Benny Blanco, who's a big pop star producer. And he's like, he was talking about how often he writes, and they're like kept saying, "What's your process? What's your process? What's your process?" He's like, "I don't know. Sometimes I like." He always has a bed in his studio, and he's like, "Sometimes we just sit on the bed because
Yeah.
it's comfortable, and it's like being in my house." He's sitting on a bed with Sia, and she writes a song in 15 minutes, and they give it to Rihanna, and it's Diamonds, one of Rihanna's biggest hits. And he's like, I can't replicate that, you know? But what the thing that stuck out to me even more than that was he was like, I fail every day. And I know I'm going to fail. It's half the time that's the object. Like, you got to get the crap out of the way. He's like, I've written this many good songs and I've written thousands of really shitty songs. And so every day I fail at writing a hit. I was like, huh, things like that stick with you. And then that's a major story. Because I think one of the things we get so stuck in our head is what if I do this work with Rob, do the dialogue, tell him all these stories, or do it myself, whichever way. And what if like only one of them's good? You know, you've got
You
one of
never
the
know
biggest
which ones are
hit
going to
writers
resonate,
of
though.
our time.
It's the ones that you almost don't share that
Yeah,
people actually engage with. It might be the
I
baseball
think
story
so.
that I don't like, but someone else. I'm not your entire audience base, and it's also true that different parts of your audience will respond to different stories.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think that's why I connected with the music reference so much, because there's different songs. You know, my husband and I like completely different music or different stories. He watches completely different movies than I watch. Every now and then we find something that we both will watch. But yeah, all of your stories connect with different people in different ways. I also feel like if you're very have a lot of integrity in your story and don't make the mistake, or it's almost like the productivity thing, right? Where you tell a story and you're like, well, I love this story, but no one else is gonna, so let me fluff this up, or let me change this around to where I can make my marketing point or whatever. If you leave it as it is and let it be natural and flow into whatever you're trying to say, then the people who really identify with it will latch into it.
yeah.
I, I gave a Bugs Bunny reference one time in an email that I wrote. And I said to my husband, I'm like, is everybody going to get this? And he's like, if they don't get Bugs Bunny, do you really want to work with them? I was like, no, you're right. Left it in.
It's funny. A client. So every month, I hold a couple of what I call story inspiration calls, which is a space for anyone in my world who wants to join. Actually, and what I do on the story inspiration calls is I go through my story research from the last month, which for me is mostly photos, but it's a few journal entries as well. And I talk through the things that I've done and the things that I could potentially write stories about and why I might write about them. What's the interesting facts? What's the potential bridge idea into my work? I then share a story and I showcase how the story is structured in terms of the timeline. So the idea from that is people listening to that can see how I've done what I've done, but then also feel inspired to like hear my story, because I think listening to other people's stories always causes your it might not be that you've done the same thing, but it'll cause other ideas to kind of float to the
Absolutely.
surface. On the last call, a client asked, should I, for my ongoing storytelling work, should I just be putting these stories out as they are, as stories, or do I
Hmm.
make space? Because I've already got 2 emails out a month going out about certain things. It's like, well, just make space in what you've got going out. Just have like a story space in the,
Yeah.
and that's what I do with mine. So I have a podcast that goes out more or less every week. I have 2 slots in that podcast for stories. I have the intro, and I have a section at the end called "What's Going On in Rob's World," which is always the same bloody stuff. It's always like some daft trail run that I've done, or it's spending time with the kids, or it's arguing with the kids, or it's arguing with Hugo to get his shoes on, or it's making observations about what's growing in the garden at the moment.
Right.
And I just share it because it's like, well, there's patterns in there. If people follow along, that they'll pick up those patterns.
Yeah.
But that's
We
that for me is the easy way of doing it, is taking what you've got that's going out at the moment and just holding space for a story at some point.
For a story. You know, you're also communicating what's important to you. Um, if I don't want to read anything about somebody who's got a couple of kids in a garden, I know that we're not going to connect. I also feel like when we share things that really matter to us, it can bridge the gap of interest. You could care less about baseball. You remember I told a baseball story,
But I do
and
like
we still
cricket,
talk.
so it's not like I never want to hear about it, because there might be some like interesting connection to it. It's not like
right?
I'm gonna shut it out of hand.
Yeah. Well, and there's a point in time I was obsessed with something called plate discipline because it just made so much sense to me when we talk about marketing and talk about hitting the right ball. Um, and that goes into all your right pitch or whatever, and people would just study it to a point that it was like really ridiculous. But these are the people who were winning World Series type things. So, you know, anyway. But that I think that goes in with our stories too, and not that you have to be so obsessed with it. There's some people who are way more passionate about something than others. But I think we discredit our everyday stories often because most of life is everyday stories. I mean, look at the stuff
Can
we
you share
watch
the
on
one you were telling
TV.
me about your time in Italy
Yeah.
recently? You mentioned one. I think was it a driving story in Italy?
Yeah. When Alberto and I were stuck in a traffic circle.
Yeah,
Yeah, we were totally stuck in this traffic circle in Florence. And he has a Garmin that he bought in 2014. So, yeah. I don't think he's updated the GPS. So here we are stuck in this traffic circle and like, you know how they drive in Italy, like crazy people. And so you're trying to see all the things and he's got the Garmin in one hand. It's a stick shift and he's, got the steering wheel. And then of course there's somebody riding a bike. There's a million little scooters going
yeah,
around. And I'm like, I'm going to turn on my phone because we leave our phones off because it's like $10 a day usually to run our phones over there. So I'm like, I'm just going to turn on the phone. It's like current information. And he's like, there's a map in the back seat. I'm like, dude, you want me to look at a paper map, use a 2014 Garmin, or pay money, 10 whole dollars to turn on my phone so we can get out of this traffic circle? And it was pretty hilarious. I mean, we were fighting at the time. If we ever get divorced, it'll be over directions. So I just turn on the phone and we get out of the traffic circle. And I was laughing about that story, and that happened a while ago. So I was actually in a networking group, and I'm like laughing about that story because it was just going through my mind. And they were like, "Get up and tell us who you are and what you do." And I told that story. And at the time, I was business coaching, and I was like, "So you can take some book that you got from somewhere." You can take some outdated information that somebody sold you that you can't let go of, or you can pay me a little bit of money and turn on the current GPS in your business. And like mouths dropped on the floor.
yeah,
But it was the simplest story, but it just hit me like, this is what we do, right? Like I bought this book and I'm going to look in here because it's free and I already, or I got this old piece of, and it might, obviously information and advice lasts for a long time, but sometimes we're just so clinging to something we believed in a past that doesn't work anymore, right? And then there's this, yeah, that story killed him
yeah.
every time.
Well, it's funny. I think for me, it's fairly simple, but it resonates because I think we've all been to other places in the world and been lost trying to navigate somewhere. I actually spent 2 months in Florence, so I know how bad the driving is. Like all directions are indicated by telepathy, and
Yes.
there's just scooters everywhere, and like people with like dogs and like shopping bags on the handlebars and stuff. And I'm like,
And every now and then somebody's grandma just walks across the
yeah,
street with her
yeah,
groceries. And you're like,
someone's nonna.
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean,
Or
but you couldn't have shared that story. But like, it communicates a lot about it communicates a lot about you, about how you go to Italy, how you got an Italian husband, and you spend time doing these things as well. So it could kind of it almost provides the subtext to you, I think, as well.
I think so too. And I would say another thing that would come up for me that I think comes up for people um, is like, will people relate to that? Am I looking at people who are going, she goes to Italy every year? Ugh. But again, if that's how you feel about that story, we're not a match. If I tell you that whole story and that's all you can think about, we're not a match.
Yeah,
And we have been so trained to scoop up everything you can get, right? There's only so much. So if you drop one, when it's not true.
yeah,
And that money that you're like, I need to grab this money while I can put it in my pocket. So if I tell this story, if I tell my story and that person doesn't resonate with it, am I going to lose that money? that type of thinking will keep you from telling your story, and it will keep you from connecting with your clients in a way that makes your work meaningful.
I think it's about picking out an interesting fact about the story as well. So, like for me, the interesting fact there was that you were arguing in the car,
Yeah.
or that you just refused, or that Alberto just refused to put the maps on. um, so you can pick out that as the interesting fact about the story, and then that allows you to sort
Yeah.
of create that bridge idea into,
Yeah.
okay, you can turn on the GPS for your business and know where you're going, type thing.
Right? Because both you can identify with both people. The person who's like, "Just let me turn on the phone." And you
Yeah,
can also identify with the person who's like, "I don't do it that way." And when you're under that stress, like there's something about being in a traffic circle in a foreign country, right? That you can feel that stress.
yeah. I tell on my podcast where I have my space for telling stories. I tell a lot of running stories because that's what I do. I go trail running, I go barefoot running. So I kind of internally, I'm like, everyone's gonna like roll their eyes so hard they practically injured themselves at another Rob Drummond running story. But I do try to pick out like an interesting fact about it. So I did one recently in Northern Ireland that was a 20-mile trail run, and it went across the Giant's Causeway. So it's like, well, picking out, okay, that's fine, and the run went well. There was no major trauma. It's like, well, okay, so what's the interesting fact? It's like, well, the interesting fact was that we had 50-mile-an-hour winds. It's some very
Oof.
Irish weather. I also did some fundraising for it. So I was like, well, I might never run 20 miles again. So I did some fundraising for a charity in El Salvador called the House of Life that I came across through a podcast. So talk about like demonstrating the power of podcasting.
Uh-huh.
So well, there is some interesting stuff in there, so you can kind of pick out the interesting facts. So yes,
Hmm.
yeah, it's another run story because that's who I am and what I do. But you can pick out some kind of interesting fact that isn't expected in the story.
I think so. Pull on the thread. But I also like for people who think their stories aren't interesting, like, I don't know. We get so overwhelmed with fantastical stories. Like if you watch the news at all,
Yeah,
you're already overwhelmed. And then if you go into any type of entertainment or what they tell us are great stories that are social media worthy or reality TV worthy or whatever, they're usually fantastical stories, some true, some not, right? But we live every day. And so I can relate to you more. You went to a running trip, and you got stuck in 50-mile-an-hour winds.
yeah.
Wow. Like even running 20 miles. I think I've ran 20 miles in my whole life.
I also did it
But
with my dad, and we did it as a motorbike trip.
okay,
So it
that's
was about it
cool.
was about memories as well.
Yeah.
So there's all these different kind of threads to it, that you can kind of pull on. So if I want it to be about memories and making memories and preserving memories, there's a nice connection there. If I want it to be about podcasting, it can be about, because I did the fundraising based on learning about this charity through a podcast. There's quite
Yeah.
a
I
lot
think
of
you
like
can pull on
different
all
like
those.
different ways you can use it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the story itself often will just dictate. I also feel like if something comes to your mind, it's a story that wants to be told.
Yes, amen to that. Yeah, yeah. If it lodges in your mind, and I think there's almost like a gestation period where if it happened like today, it's like, okay, you probably need to sleep on it for a couple of nights. And if it so the nice thing about the story inspiration calls that I do is because I do them every month. There's this thing on the calendar where I then have to make time because I host a session and I'm sharing stories. I then have to go through and actually review the story ideas that I've come up with, which in your case might be the sticky notes or the handwritten notes, but for me it's generally
Yeah.
photos on my phone. So
Okay.
I have to go back and do that, and it kind of makes time to kind of go back and do that research, because otherwise I don't kind of allow myself that reflection time, or I don't allow myself at the end of the month to kind of go back through all my journal entries and figure out, well, what's actually in here. So I think there's like an optimal. I think there's a bit of a gestation period where if a story still lodges in your brain
Hmm.
a little bit more time into the future, it's like, well, I think there's a reason why we remember the things that we remember, because we forget almost everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how things come up. Like, I just, maybe last month, it doesn't matter what time, I wrote two emails. One was that I had been working on for a while. I listened to a podcast, and the way what they were talking about really stuck in my brain, and so I wrote a bunch about it. I actually did some research on it, um, and I had that all on a just on a Google Doc, and I wanted to get it out. Like, this is an email I want to write this week, and it just wasn't finishing. I'm like, all right, I'll just let it sit here, and that sat there for maybe a few months. And I went back and I was looking through some things, and I saw it, and I had a memory of a childhood story that came to me that went with it. So I put that on top of it. And then I still just couldn't conclude the story in the way that felt natural. I felt like I was forcing a conclusion. I ran it through AI. Uh, Sometimes that works. Sometimes it'll bring something up to the surface, sometimes not. So I'm like, all right. So I left it again. And I was a little annoyed with it. So the next morning I was doing my just morning journaling, and I wrote an email in 5 minutes. It could just hit my head, went to my laptop, there it went. So I come back to this story. I was in the group with Megan Macedo, and she had told a story about her grandfather. And I was still looking at this email, like, I really want to get this email about this topic out. And I was, So I listened to her. She often will talk her story into her phone or type her story into her phone, and then she changes it around, maps it out or whatever. So I went through her whole story. It was something she recorded, and I wrote another email in 5 minutes. I was like, what? Like, but it was something I had already processed. And what I understand a lot of times when I'm coming back to these things and just working through them, it's more that it's unfinished because I haven't fully processed. That's why the thought's not coming to the bottom. That's why it's not concluding, but it's worth hanging on to because I'm trying to process it. I listened to that podcast and remembered what that guy said and researched it for a reason. The story hit me for a reason. Like, it was all coming together. And then finally, after I had written that email based on Megan's story, I finished the process of it. It's like sometimes they just drip through and you hang on to it and let it bake. But you gotta shove the bread in the oven and leave the oven door closed. And other times you're cooking, like, quick, fast. Things come at different times. And I used to struggle with allowing that. Like, it would really
Yeah.
frustrate me that I couldn't finish this, and I wrote that, and now I'm like, that's just the way they come out.
I think there's an overly utilitarian perspective of like, how is this story going to be useful? How is it going to connect? I fully subscribe to. I basically just tell the stories that I want to tell, and then I find
Mhm.
ways to find an interesting fact about the story and
Yeah.
connect them into the message. It just feel otherwise you're trying to like force fit some story that doesn't really resonate. And actually, even if you tell a story and you don't in the end put it in your emails or you don't share it out to your audience, even if you told it for yourself, that can still be quite a therapeutic
Oh, yeah.
thing because you're the first listener. You're
Yeah.
audience member number one. Um,
Right? The words we write for ourselves are always the best words.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, the one I wrote in 5 minutes was definitely something I wrote for myself, and I was emotional just writing it. I'm like, oh, there it
yeah.
was. It was, something that wants to come out, not in a bad way. It was a good story, whatever. But I think when we really connect to our stories like that, people, they feel your energy, but also you get to feel it. You get to experience that again. Like writing a story about your grandfather telling you those stories. That's you getting to experience that moment again.
I think the final thing I want to say about sort of finding joy in your story is that I think there's a future. I think there's a obviously stories by nature are mostly past tense, backwards facing, but I think there's also we interact with them from the present moments, but then there's also a future facing elements of like, well, what's and this is what been trying to. If someone works with me, I spend a lot of time talking about past events, but then we have a bit of time talking about, well, what's the vision for the future? What's the golden
Mhm.
vision that you want to create? Because all the clues to that golden vision, all the threads for that are going to be in the past. And I think envisioning what can be is also a joyful activity.
Definitely. That's interesting. I'm gonna have to think about that. I think you're right in that our lives have threads.
Yeah.
And I tell my clients often use your imagination for good instead of evil.
Yeah.
Because we're taught to use
That's
them
why I
for
have my,
evil.
you can't really see it very well from here, but that's why I have my vision board behind me
Okay.
with
Nice.
some of the things I've done, some of the things I've not done. Some are
That
just,
you want to do.
yeah, some of the things that places I might want to go. I've got pyramids on there. I've got a box of books from a forthcoming fiction book that I keep telling myself I'm going to write. I've got a big trail run, which was me. Yeah, we've got a nice house extension on there. So it's just, I think the visual part. I think the future is more visual, and actually having that vision board then allows me to kind of pick out stories that kind of thread into that vision as well.
That's
It's fun.
interesting.
It's fun.
I do find the future to be more visual. And there are times that, like, if someone tells me, what do you envision for your business in the next 10 years? I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But when I can connect it to things like that, like, how do I started asking myself a different question. How do I want to experience my life? How do I want to experience putting this podcast together, interviewing people? How do I want to experience holidays, vacations, our time here, my time here with my husband, my friends, the books that I read? How do I want to experience my life? And I think about it more in that than I used to, or be like, okay, let's plan the goal and work backwards. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different.
Yeah, that works for some people. I've never found it works well for me, just because I'm about as goal oriented as a toothbrush. So I make goals, I put them in a drawer, I forget about them, and then I discover them about 6 months later and go, oh, that was a really good goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think my head's broken in that respect. So
Oh, I don't think it's broken. I think the productivity culture is broken.
yeah, possibly. Cool. Well, I think let's potentially wrap this one up here. Where can people learn more about the Joy Experiments, and what's your plans for the podcast?
Yeah. So you can find all the things about the Joy Experiment on my website. It's thejoyexperiment.live, Live. I also have a free assessment there. You can see if you're living in your values or someone else's. And as far as the podcast, my goal there, since we were talking about not having goals or having goals, my intention with the podcast is to interview as many women, have as many discussions as I can with women who are successful in their businesses and have created them from joy. Before I started the podcast, I was looking for people, guys, gals, whatever, and had a lot of difficulty finding that. You usually find people who say, I struggled this much, then I met my goal, now I'm happy. Yeah, I want to do that. So I'm happy right now, and I want to go build this thing in that joy and create from that space. And so I know there are other people who have done it, and I couldn't find that readily either. So I've been out looking for them and just having them on the podcast in all various shapes and sizes. I'm having, I think May is my English month. I've got 4 Brits on this month. Marketer, one lady has taken, she bought a $700 laptop and she's now a $250 million a year company. I'm excited to talk to her. She's a super joyful, experience oriented person as well. And so that's the intention for the podcast. We see all these people who you can find hustle culture all around you, productivity culture all around you, and that's cool if that's the way you want to do it. But I was looking for something different. And that's what we're doing on the Joy Experiment.
Yeah, that's great. It's gonna be matriarchs who save the world. I think the boys have cocked it up on the whole.
Yeah. I don't know.
On that, I'll connect you with Rachel Elmore. Love, I think she'd be a great podcast guest.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Remney is going to be on this month.
Oh, super! Yeah.
And you recommended her.
Yeah. Brilliant.
So I'm excited to interview her. She's very values driven.
Yes.
In her business and her life.
Yeah. Super.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I'll put all those links in the chat. For anyone listening who's been listening to me mention story inspiration calls, I'll put links to that in the chat as well. So I do those every month. There's one midday UK time and one at about 7 a.m. UK time, which is really for an Australian audience. So I'll put the links in the chat to that as well. But yeah, thanks for coming on. It's been great to catch up with Roberta.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Yeah, good. Well, yeah, I'll be following along with the podcast, and yeah, hope it goes well.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sovereign Finance. For more episodes, transcripts, in-depth articles, and community, please take a minute now to subscribe free at sovereignfinance.substack.com. See you next time.